Hey everyone, welcome to Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. We're coming to you as always courtesy of our broadcasting partner, moretalk.tv. Today on the show, I'm honored to welcome Neil Helm. Neil is the scholar in residence at Atlantic University, where he conducts research and assists students with their research in the graduate program. He had a long career in space and advanced communications research, and for 18 years, he directed a research center at the School of Engineering and Applied Science of the George Washington University. As a child, he had a dramatic near-death experience that was spiritually transformative and ultimately led him to pursue his master's degree in transpersonal studies and a pending PhD in transpersonal psychology. He is a featured presenter at the upcoming conference entitled Breakthroughs Toward a New Consciousness, Science, Spirituality, and the Limitless Mind. And that takes place here in Virginia Beach at the a.r.e. from March 27th through the 29th. And his particular presentation will be on the topic of near-death experiences and mystical experiences, as well as the survival of consciousness. Neil, thank you so much for joining us today on Reflections.
Well, I'm honored and pleased to be here today.
Excellent. I wanted to, start kind of at a ground level and maybe dive a little bit into your background as far as your career in space science. Can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to that career and kind of how that helped to shape who you are?
Yes, of course. I born and reared on a farm and ranch right near the North Dakota-Montana border. And I was supposed to be the rancher of the family, and the youngest of three sons. So I had to get my military obligation out of the way. And I was young for my high school graduation. I was just 17, and I went into the military. And I guess I tested pretty well. And my brother was also in the Army, what is called the Army Security Agency, and I got called into that and sent to MIT to do some studies in propagation, and wasn't sure what I was being trained to do. But then on October 4th, 1957, I was out in a very quiet area in Arizona in the desert with some small antennas, and over the horizon came Sputnik 1. And
Mm,
I was an enlisted person, so I didn't have the intelligence to know that it was the first orbital object in space, but it was, and I was there as part of the U.S. government tracking team on the first day of space. So I tend to say I was, I was there right in the beginning, and
right.
that just piqued my interest. I got discharged on a Wednesday, and Thursday morning I was at Georgetown University, ready to take classes, but I worked my way through school, starting out as a technician and ending up as an engineer. And so, as an engineer, then, and with the space background, and um, in this country at least, having uh, 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 classified backgrounds, and so that you could work in certain programs helped. So I had a number of job offers when I was ready to go into the field of space, and I went with a new company called ComSat, Communication Satellite Corporation, and had a wonderful 18-year career with them.
Excellent. I guess I want to take another step even further back because our listeners may be wondering how you came from that background and came to be discussing topics like consciousness and
Mhm.
near-death experiences. So I was wondering if you could share with us your personal story. I understand you had a near-death experience at the age of
Yes.
5, and how did that help shape your personal philosophy and, of course, your academic pursuits as well as you went throughout your life?
Yes, an excellent question. But the truth of it is that my middle brother, who was to be a pastor, dropped out of the seminary, and being an older brother, he got the ranch. So I had to, in the last 6 months of my military training, I had to find out what I wanted to do with my life. So that's why I got myself into Georgetown, and realized that I had to do something else than be a rancher, and I wanted to. I was excited about um, uh, getting involved in academic studies. And yes, going back to the near death experience, that's we were, it was 1944, and the Allies had invaded Normandy. And so my mother thought, well, the war, you know, is going well. And so she took the first vacation in many, many years and took my two older brothers and I to central Montana to visit a cousin who was a physician. And we were driving from, and that's a story, wonderful story in itself. At that time, a middle-aged woman who was running 3 hospitals. And so we were driving from one hospital up to the mountains of Montana where she had a TB sanitarium. And she just pulled off the road at what this object looked like a barn. And she said, let's take a swim. And it was a hot springs, and the local ranchers had just dug a big pit in the ground a few hundred yards down from where hot water came out of the mountain. And it's about 100 miles as the crow flies from Yellowstone. So, you know, geysers and hot water is fairly common. And so we went in this hot springs, and I had never swam in my life. And I was really frustrated to see that my mother and my cousin and my older brothers, when did they ever learn to swim? They seemed to be able to swim. And so I thought, I can do this. And I tried and failed. I took a few paddles and went down like a rock and gulping hot water. My last thought was that dying by drowning is going to be extremely painful. And then all at once, a incredible serenity and calmness came over me. And I had a traditional near-death experience. I don't know, do you want to, do you have to have time now to go into that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd love
Okay,
to hear all about it if you don't mind.
good. Okay, well, again, it was the most wonderful feeling. And I left my body, had an out of body experience, and drifted into initially a beautiful meadow. These are all, by the way, very traditional near death symbols. You have
Right.
the beautiful meadow with flowers and a lake. And it's very beautiful. A lot of people even see gemstones, and it's a very, very gorgeous setting, very pastoral and calm and again serene. And I crossed the lake and into a tunnel on the mountain on the other side, and there was no fear there. There was no fear of the tunnel, because I could see a light at the end of it. And I went down this tunnel, long tunnel, and came out, and the whole right side of the wall was a light that is true in the sense of the word unique. You just don't see it other than it's the light of God. And there I was standing. And by the way, I was swimming naked as a boy with just, you know, my mother and my cousin who was a doctor and my two brothers. So I was standing there, sort of stark, bare, naked, nude, in front of this light. And it was just it's in the true sense, the word ineffable. You cannot find words in our language to describe the beauty of this. The light, and it manifested itself as God. You know, I am the light of God. And as a 5-year-old, I had gone to Sunday school and everything. I knew, you know, I knew what that was supposed to be. And it sort of just wafted over me, like a light film of mist. And it was just love. It was pure love and forgiveness, and the most wonderful feeling. In many people in near death experiences at that particular point say, I do not ever want to go back. You know, why would I want to leave this most perfect feeling and go back to the world of pain and suffering? But I, being 5, you know, didn't have any knowledge of decisions. And people in the near death field say, well, you know, I tried to argue with God and say I wanted to stay there. But the light said to me, 5 words: it is not your time. And back I came to my physical body in the hot springs, and my middle brother dove into the water and physically hit me and realized that no one should be under the water, and pulled me up. And my aunt, being a cousin, really, we called her an aunt, but she was a cousin, being a physician, was able to resuscitate me and bring me back. Now that was painful. I mean, irping hot water on the edge of the hot springs. Um, but within half an hour, I really received my first sort of inner knowledge, inner knowing from God, and I continued to have these conversations nearly every day of my life. And the first one sort of said, "Be cool, Neil. You don't have to tell your parents about this. They're just going to say it's an hallucination. And for goodness sakes, don't tell your soon to be first grade friends, because they will just laugh at you and not understand it, of course." So I kept it to myself for 31 years, something like that, until 1975, when I was at a very highbrow party in Georgetown, part of Washington. And the one of the people, I was in a little conversation group, and I could hear out of the corner of my ear another conversation group use the words near-death experience. I had never heard those words. And so I sort of quietly exited from my conversation group and went over to the next, and this lady was talking about a new book by Dr. Raymond Moody, and Life After Life was the name of the book, in 1975. And it was the first time, it was seminal research on his part. So he coined the term near-death experience. And it just has had a profound effect on my entire life from age 5.
Yeah, holding on to that secret for so long, was it something that influenced you as you went through your academic career, and how was it balancing kind of uh, coping with this taboo subject and knowing that you've had this personal experience, but not being able to share it or talk about it within your academic communities?
Yes, that's again a good question. Um, when I say I first had that first inner knowing, and then around age 10, for around age 10, I was frustrated. All of my members of my family had to play a musical instrument, or I was playing a little bit of the piano. Um, and I was trying to write a song, and I got frustrated, and I said, "God, help me write this song." And in 15 minutes, I had the melody and the words and the harmony and everything to quite a nice song. And I certainly couldn't have done it at age 10. And I realized that, I can ask for things if they're not out of the way, and they happen. And so that clarified sort of my standing. And I, again, over these years as a child, you don't fully comprehend and understand this, but that I had some gifts. So that, again, not that I had them, but I was given them. I was given them by God. And that progressed. And I don't, at age 12 or 13 or 14 or something like that, God said, "Well, do you want to be psychic?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure what that means, but I'm open to it. I'm open to it." And then, "Do you want to be, you know, telepathic? Do you want to be all of these psychic experiences and the inner knowing and the, inner understanding, and uh, a a wider worldview, so to speak?" And then later came pre and post cognition. I could look into the past, and I could look into the future. Now, I don't do this every day, but in certain worldview situations, I can see what's going to happen in the future. Um, but even the first one, I missed the first one. At ages 6 and 7, I was able to communicate with animals. And being on a ranch and a farm, we had dogs and horses, and I could communicate with the horses. So we still use teams of horses up until I was about 8 years old, and I could talk to the horses, and they would, you know, they would they'd say cool, and communicate on that level. So I had these gifts, and I knew that I could use them, but I had to use them in his work. I mean, I couldn't go to the racetrack, for example. That was that was forbidden. I mean, you had to use them for good things. So So I was and naive to think that I could go to the best schools. I went to the Georgetown School of Foreign Service, the best school of international affairs in the country. Even though, again, I was an engineer, I took special math courses at the school at the time and some science courses. My first degree was in international affairs, and then I combined those two when I went to ComSat and started off the first 5 years in the international affairs office. But I like technology, and it again, the combination of the gifts and hard work, like everything else in life. If it doesn't come to you, you've got to go and do it. So I poured myself into my work. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed technology. So very quickly, 6 years, 7 years. So I was still in my late 20s, early 30s. After I got out of school, I was already, I had gone to ComSat Laboratories, our research facility, and I was quickly, I didn't have the exact title, but I became their chief technology officer. And again, things, you just, all these gifts, and I have the ability to see synergies of 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 things that are going to happen. So again, my post cognition of looking into the future. So, for example, and I don't take, I've never taken credit for this, and I won't, but I could see the synergies coming together for the internet. You had to have, you had to have better computing, and then better storage, and better memory, and then you had fiber optic cables come along, and so all of these, you had the computing side and the network side, and all of this I could see. Now this was in the 80s. I could see this all coming together, and so again, combinations of hard work and gifts. I was sort of ahead of the ball, so to speak, and then I was I had a wonderful career, and still
That's right.
have.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love to hear this story, and as I find out more about your life story, I love that in a way it parallels Casey's story, in that at a young age he had these experiences, sort of a near-death, otherworldly experience, and he realized that there were these gifts awakening within him, and he also was very devoted to the fact that this has to be used in a way of service only for the highest good, which I think it's so amazing that you parallel that. And I guess in saying that, when did you first come across the Cayce material or the life of Edgar Cayce, and
Yes.
how did that influence your path?
Yes. Well, again, in 1975, when I read Raymond Moody's Life After Life and realized that I wasn't the only person that had had a near-death experience. Up to that time, honestly, I thought it was just God and me. I thought it was, we were buds. And I didn't know that anyone else had ever had this experience. I had never talked to anybody about it or heard anything about it. And so all at once I realized that other people, and then I realized, of course, God will bless a lot of people, and not just me, and openly. And so I began to look into people who had similar experiences and seemed to be blessed and seemed to have received, and they're using these gifts. And Edgar Cayce's name came right up with that group of people who seem to have near death type experiences that were assisting them in their growth. And so I got Thomas Chagrew's "There's a River" and other books on Edgar Cayce, and went to Virginia Beach and read more on him, and realized that yes, we had a lot in common. I mean, he had, after his near-death experience, which he was about age 5, also very similar to me, when he drowned. And again, that story is not known very well. I researched it. I started in 2009 researching Edgar Cayce's near-death experience, and I knew it. Or at least I had this feeling again. And you get these inner feelings that there is something there that's out there that's going to, be the key to open that door. And I had read Harmon Bro's A Seer out of season 3 and going on 4 times, and somehow I knew the key was there. And
Hmm.
it was just one line and towards the end of the book. But um, Harmon Brough was in 1944 a graduate student working for Edgar Cayce. And Edgar, this was a year before his death, even less than a full year before his death, and knew that he was ill and knew that Harmon Brough was going to write his PhD dissertation on Edgar's life. So Edgar was giving Harmon backgrounds, early backgrounds on his life that he wanted to make sure was included in his memoirs. And so Harmon Brough says, and Edgar told me that, quote, I can just about quote it, I drowned as a youth and died. And my little mysterious friends visited me once as an adult. And that's the complete sentence. But the first part of it, I drowned and died. And Edgar wanted the people to know that. He wanted to make sure that Brough put that into his dissertation. And well, now people ask, why didn't Edgar talk about that more in his life? Well, you have to think back. Well, first, the seminal research by Raymond Moody took place 30 years after Edgar Cayce's death in 75. Edgar died in 45. And then second, in Edgar's circle that he wanted to be a part of, the Christian community, especially in the first half of the 20th century, were not very uh, happy with people who talked about near death, talking about piercing the veil, going to the other side, meeting Jesus, having divinities and angels and things to your life. So Edgar just simply couldn't talk about it and in his community, but he wanted to make sure that it was recorded in his memoirs.
Right, absolutely. Neil, we're going to take a quick break, but we're going to come right back to talk more about your wonderful life story and, of course, where you sit right now at Atlantic University. But we'll be right back with more with Neil Helm here on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. Welcome back to Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. We're diving right back into my interview with Neil Helm. And Neil, we were talking kind of about this synergistic ability that you have to kind of intuitively figure out what may happen and what's kind of building as far as both in your personal life and what you can see around you going on in the academic and community and society as well. I was wondering over the years, how have you kind of helped yourself to maintain this synergistic kind of foresight that you have?
Thank you. Thank you. It's a good question. You make right decisions, and I think, have goals and intentions of of doing good and helping humankind. Again, I think that's part of the gift that we receive, that we are sort of guided to work on behalf of the the big team, and and I certainly I like that. My wife is a psychologist, a very prominent psychologist, professor, and writer, and she had a wonderful practice when we lived in Washington, D.C. But I wanted to come down to Virginia Beach here, to the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment. I wanted to come down here and be a bigger part of this community, and to study down here, to do research down here, to lecture down here. And so we initially set out a 5-year plan to come down, and then the 5-year plan went by because my wife's practice was just going so very well. And so then we started a second 5-year plan, and so finally we were able in 2009 to move down here, which is a delight. I recommend it to other people out there who perhaps are retired and want to find a community as loving and as comfortable and just sharing and nurturing community as we have here in Virginia Beach. I can't say enough good things about it. So down we come in 2009. I I'm a perpetual student. I'm trying all the 18 years that I was at George Washington University and my space career there. I ran a major space center at George Washington University. I was taking courses. I was trying to expand, even though at times I couldn't. I traveled a lot and had a good sized staff and a number of faculty people that worked on my teams. So, but when I got down here in 2009, I signed up to do the master's degree in transpersonal studies here at Atlantic University. I was pleased to do that. And it was, again, a wonderful opportunity to learn more about consciousness, about dreams and the transpersonal. What does transpersonal mean? The in addition to self, the outside of self. So it's meditation's a big part of my life. I usually meditate every morning between sort of 8 and 9 or 8:30 and 9:30, and so to understand that better. And again, this brings the gifts back in, because when I'm in a meditative state, and my morning meditations are more what I call mindful, they're not deep meditations. And so we have a big screen porch here, and we did in Washington, D.C. as well, where we lived. And so I sit out on my screen porch, usually, which is up near the trees up high, and listen to the birds and meditate with God. And I do it every morning. And it's a wonderful way to start my day. And so I wanted to learn more about meditation and learn more about dreams and learn more about how I act and interact and react to the people around me, to my family, to my friends, to my God. And so that master's program was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. And upon completion of it, they asked me if I would join the faculty as the uh, uh, scholar in residence, and I was very honored. I was pleased, exactly what I wanted to do, and I may have hinted that I wanted to do this. I'm not certain. Anyway, it was a it was a dream come true, so to speak. So but then I didn't want to stop. I was frustrated. I never finished my first doctorate. Again, I got this very important job at ComSat, and uh, I tell the story. It doesn't. I mean, it seems untrue if you don't understand the context. But after a few years at ComSat Laboratories, I went to my boss, who was the director of the labs, and I said, I wonder if I could stop for a year or two and finish my doctorate. And he sort of looked up at me and he said, "Neil," he said, "you have nearly 300 working for you." He said, I can't stop now. I was, not number two exactly, but I was in the second tier down of the list. And he said, "I can't spare you to step out at this point in this." And we were really dynamic. We were a young laboratory, and we were just doing some outstanding research. And I guess in retrospect, I went back to my office and said, "Yeah, I guess he's right. I can't take the time to do this." But I was always frustrated. And when I went to George Washington, to run their space center, I walked in, and I said this in my retirement. And again, it's the interesting context. I walked into the dean's office and introduced myself and had a conversation. And he walked me into his secretary and he said, "Here's Dr. Helm." And I said, "No, it's Mr. Helm." And the secretary went up to the wall of faculty and she wrote Dr. Helm. And you know, and so for 18 years, I was Dr. Helm and Professor Helm. And I really never never on paper or never officially should have been either. And I said this in my retirement. I said, but I was slavish that I never ever signed it. I mean, I never ever signed my name as Dr. Helm or Professor Helm. I always, but that's the way I was carried at the university. And I have to say that I was honored, after a few years there, by being having my peers um, um, nominate me into the Academy of Astronautics, and it's quite an exceptional academic group. Has comity with all of the um, uh, science uh, um, institutions of the world, so the academies of science of every country. The Academy of Astronautics is a part of that. So I could walk into the National Academy of Science in Washington, and then once they knew that, then they asked me to be on their committee. So I can see why. And there were only 3 of us in our whole School of Engineering and Applied Science at George Washington that were academics. Were in institutions, and was the dean and my boss and myself. So so there were just the 3 of us who were either the Academy of Engineering or the Academy of Science, or in my case, the Academy of Astronautics. But I wanted to get that PhD. So now I'm finishing it up. I went to a small school in California where I'm attending classes and working online to some extent, and getting my doctorate in psychology. I've changed fields to perhaps you get a better understanding of, again, of what I said, your relationship to others, your relationship to your family, your relationship to God. Psychology does that, but it's transpersonal psychology. So again, I'm learning more about dreams, I'm learning more about meditations, I'm learning more about cognition and consciousness. And this is where now I've gotten to the point where I can lecture on consciousness, and I look forward to doing that at future a.r.e. conferences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that kind of segues into another question that I had, is if maybe you can talk a little bit about what the conference attendees can expect from your presentation. It's the conference from March 27th through the 29th. It's entitled Breakthroughs Towards New Consciousness, Science,
Yes,
Spirituality, and the Limitless Mind. And I understand that your talk will be kind of centered on near-death and mystical experiences, as well as kind of the survival nature of consciousness. So I was wondering if you can give us a little insight as to what attendees can expect to take away from that.
certainly. Well, I will include my own death experience. I will finalize my own near-death experience. I will finalize with Edgar Cayce's near-death experience, but I'll also introduce their in consciousness. There's some real breakthroughs that are happening, and again, people that have made some important, we have done some important work in consciousness. We lost uh, uh, Dr. Emoto from Japan, and he was the person that first looked at water and water crystals. And he could he would go into a conference like that, and he would just say, bring me 2 glasses of water, not my water, just bring them out of the tap from wherever I am. And he would take 1 glass and say, you are the most beautiful water in the world. You are perfect water, and I love you, and I honor you, and I adore you, and what great water you are. And you just have the greatest gifts of giving life. And then he'd put the other water on the shelf, wouldn't say anything to it. And then he would take drops of that water and look at it in microscopes. And the water that he talked to and that he praised and that he honored, that water would look like the most beautiful snowflake. And it would just beam and have uh, just seem to reply to him how great and how beautiful and how wonderful things are. And some other researchers have done that with animals and with trees and with plants. And we suspect that, and I certainly did it with my grandchildren, that play beautiful music to them when they're in their mother, and have their mother's rub them and talk to them how beautiful they are and how wonderful they're going to be and how much they're loved, and play Bach to them and how important that is. And then you take the other water, and then you could even the other water, you take a drop of that and you look at it under a microscope, and it's sort of gnarly, it just doesn't have any beauty to it. And if you leave it long enough, that water will get green and contaminated, and this water over here will stay bright and fresh and wonderful. So there's a lot of things in consciousness. There's a if I can take the time, and I won't go into it, but quantum mechanics and quantum physics is just a breakthrough in consciousness and in science. And we've had Newtonian science. If you think of everything above the atom, the 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 atomic Newton's laws sort of work. And if you then look at the subatomic particles, they don't work in the same way. In fact, they don't work at all in the same way. And some people say they're, again, ineffable, and some people say they're just, we just don't know enough to know how to, how to understand them. But Einstein, and going back to Niels Bohr and going back to Max Planck, the German scientist who got the Nobel Prize for quantum physics, said there's consciousness there. And Niels Bohr said it, and to a lesser extent, Einstein said it. There's consciousness within those subatoms, and some of my research right now is going in that direction. And you can, and I won't go into it in detail, but there's a experiment you do. It's called the double slit experiment, where an atom, or not an atom, but you can use an electron or a proton, and if it doesn't know that it's being observed, it's very harmonious and moving around, and it moves around in a waveform, in a vibration. And if it thinks it's being observed, it doesn't want to be seen. It doesn't want to show all right now. And so if it thinks it's being observed, it changes to a particle. It gets rid of all of its beautiful form and vibration, and it just becomes a marble, a small marble, but a marble. And 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 so how can the smallest of elements change? There has to be some consciousness there. There has to be some decision making there. There
Right.
has to be, it has to have the ability to know that it's being observed, and that's consciousness. And so it's such an interesting field. And so,
Yeah.
yes, in my speech, I will talk. And by the way, and very briefly, there's a new strain. It's so new that it hasn't reached the scientific journals or anything yet. It hasn't really even been announced. But the Russians, we have, what, 12 strands of DNA, and 3 are fairly well researched. And the Russians say they found a 4th, and that this strain of DNA acts very similar to quantumness. That is to say, it hides and doesn't like to be observed. Now, just a few seconds more. What if we change the title of the observer to creator? All at once, we have a creator, and this is what Einstein said, a creator that controls matter. So that we have a creator before matter. You have to have a creator before matter comes into being.
Right.
If we get to the point where we can begin to show that to modern science, I mean, that's a breakthrough that's won't happen in my lifetime, but it's fun doing that kind of research. And I'll
Yeah.
talk very briefly about that. And yes, then I'll include my own near-death experience and the beauty of near-death experience. And the part that I haven't gotten into is that, yes, I went through that tunnel. I pierced the veil. I went to the other side. And I can do that now in my deep meditations. I can go to the other side again. I can recall a past life experience, for example. and I've researched that. I've gone to where I lived in my most recent past life. I went to where I died, and I could do all of that through deep meditation. So that's
That's
fun.
wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. And for me personally, it's very synchronistic in that I love studying and reading up on and doing trying to connect my own dots on the current research that's out there about consciousness, meditation, even holistic health stuff as well. It's all incredibly fascinating. It seems like there's this big boom within this field of research
Oh,
that stuff
yes.
is really coming out, and the research is just incredibly fascinating and really kind of shifts your paradigm and your worldview and the way
It
that you look at
does.
yourself. We talked quite a bit about some of the research, but I was wondering if, as scholar in residence at Atlantic University, you probably have kind of your fingers on a number of research projects as an advisor, and of course, doing your own research. I was wondering, other than what we've already talked about, what else in the field of research do you see going on that really excites you about the future?
Mm. Thank you. Well, certainly dreams. We
Yeah.
still don't have a really good handle on dreams. Edgar Cayce, talked a lot about it, and at the Association for Research and Enlightenment here, we have a number of scholars who, Henry Reed, who's just recently retired from our faculty, was on our faculty for what, 25 years, is an expert on dreams. And we know how important they are to us because we sort of reflect our day by day experiences through our dreams. And those who, and I don't do it, for periods of time I worked very hard getting up at night and writing down or having a little dictaphone near my bed and just speaking into it my dreams. But I'm a very lucid dreamer, and so I'm blessed with the ability to turn dreams on and off, and continue them. I could have a most beautiful dream. It is so wonderful. It is so exciting. I'm having such a good time. And I wake up in the morning and I say, whoa, gee, I don't want this to end here. And so when I go to bed the next night, I will have an intention. I will say, now I'm going to pick that dream up and carry it right on. And I do. I pick the dream up and we just continue it. And it's such fun. And so there has to be more research in this area that we know the importance of dreams in our lives and to get that across to people.
Wonderful. And I guess one last question is, as now you become more involved with Atlantic University and the A.R.E., where do you see the role? What role do you see them playing in the future? Coming from your academic background and knowing that there is kind of this, um, I guess, a much larger discussion about both scientific and spiritual topics, and trying to find a common ground seems to be a theme now. Where do you see the A.R.E. in the future, and how do you see science coming together with spirituality?
Uh, Great, good. Well, let's just look at the title, the Association for Research and Enlightenment. And it just goes, there's very few other associations that have right in its moniker, what we're doing. And so we want to be a leading edge in transpersonal research. Our university is expanding. We've just received the accreditation to have a leadership master's in addition to a master's of arts in leadership, in addition to a master's of arts in transpersonal studies. And we believe we've never to this point, and it doesn't seem like a big thing, but it really is, we've not to this point had um, government loan agreements so that our students could get government loans. And we hope soon we will have that. We think that will expand dramatically our Atlantic University. And when you expand your university, you expand your faculty, you expand your research. So we believe we're really growing and going in an excellent direction and a good direction for future growth. And I'm I really want to be a part of that. I'm not ready to hang up uh, you know my my coat on the door, so to speak. I want to be, as long as I can, I want to be a part of this research.
Absolutely. Well, it's an honor to have you on board, and very happy to have somebody like yourself with such a prestigious background and such an open mind to the Cayce principles that have come up in the readings. It's just an honor and pleasure to have you. So thank you so much for sharing your life story and, of
But
course, all of your academic work. You're doing great work. So thank you, Neil.
thank you very much. It was great. I enjoyed very much talking with you and reflections and the wisdom of Edgar Cayce. And Edgar Cayce is, when I speak of Atlantic University, again, Edgar Cayce is just an integral part of everything that we do. He just focuses and refocuses in our work. So
Absolutely.
his leadership and legacy is still very real.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you for joining us today on Reflections, Neil. It's been a pleasure.
Good. Okay. My pleasure.
Don't miss your chance to attend Neil's presentation at the upcoming a.r.e. conference here in Virginia Beach entitled Breakthroughs Towards a New Consciousness, Science, Spirituality, and the Limitless Mind. Neil's presentation will cover the topic of near-death and mystical experiences, and of course the survival of consciousness. This conference takes place from March 27th through the 29th, and you can register for this and all the other conferences offered here at the a.r.e. in Virginia Beach by visiting our website at edgarcayce.org/conferences. To learn more about Atlantic University, where Neil is the scholar in residence, you can visit their website at atlanticuniv.edu. On behalf of everyone here at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and of course moretalk.tv, thank you so much for tuning in to Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. Hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we'll catch you next week. And now it is time for the thought for the day here on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. And joining me as always for the thought for the day is Dr. Bill Austin. Bill, thank you so much for joining us again for the thought for the day. It's always an honor to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you, Brent. It's always great to be here. Really enjoy it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And if you can go ahead and read the thought for the day for our listeners today.
I'd be happy to. This comes from reading 1786-2. For only that you give away do you possess. For only that you give away do you possess. I think the question is, what is it that we're giving away? Or that we would possess? And for me, when we give away kindness, in whatever form that comes, to me, that is the greatest service that we can give to another. It's just to be kind to them. And I feel like we're really rewarded, as we give these attributes of love and patience and kindness and charity. It all comes back to us. One way or the other, it comes back in a very nice way. And it's like we can't ever get rid of it, because as soon as we give it away, more is coming into us. But they're really the attributes of the divine that I think Cayce is talking about here. Yes, it may be some money, or it may be, some clothing or some canned goods, and all that's really good. But I think what he's really talking about for me is those deeper attributes of love and kindness and patience to other individuals. And as we do that, it comes right back into our being. So we never run out on empty on that. There's always more to give, because it's always being replenished.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this. You raised a great point in that this is another one of those beautiful poetic Cayce readings, but it has a twofold meaning. It has its basis both in the physical and the metaphysical, which I love about this reading. It's so short, but it's incredibly profound. And he says, "For only that you give away do you possess." And I think you really hit it on the head when you talk about the metaphysical meaning. Cayce brought up in his reading a number of times that if you are to want something as far as a metaphysical principle, the idea of love, the idea of patience, the idea of charity, these are things that you have to give out in order to get back. He constantly brought that up and said, this is how you accomplish your goals when it comes to the metaphysical, the spiritual principles, the fruits of labor. And that is something that I work with a lot in my life. If you want people to treat you the way that you think humans should be treated, then you have to put that out first. If you are keeping tabs on yourself and you're finding that I'm not treating this person fairly, I'm not showing these people love, I'm not showing them compassion, I'm not opening my heart to everything that's offered in this beautiful world, you're not going to get that back. It always stems from, as Cayce said, you have to go within first, and that is your place of peace, your reference point for what's going on outside of you. And I think that this reading really, really gets that. And the other aspect, I guess, would be the physical, which I tend to agree with you where it's not first and foremost. I would say maybe it's secondary to the metaphysical meaning of this reading. But there is a bit of the physical, how this can be applied to our physical life. And for me, it makes me think of prosperity and wealth. And of course, that's all a very spiritual thing. But if you want more physical things to come into your life, maybe you are looking for some physical thing to manifest in your life, has its roots in the spiritual, but you also have the ability, if you so choose, to give out things physically. And it comes from that realization that the material world is built upon the spiritual world. So if you understand this, you realize that the material things that so many people have issues with clinging so strongly to and not wanting to lose in their life, if you kind of work with not clinging so hard to those things, you'll find that more of those things will come in your life. And you'll also find that you have this sense of inner peace that is not dictated by whether those things do actually exist in your life. And to me, that's an incredibly powerful lesson to be learned, to realize that the metaphysical, the spiritual principles, working with ideals, that's the true, fruits of your labor, the true fruits of the spirit. And remaining focused on that is, I think, what we're here for. I think that's why we manifest each life.
Mm. Yeah, you really bring back that old saying, or that common saying that came from the Cayce reading: spirit is the life, mind is the builder, and physical is the result. When you said that, all of the physical is based on the spiritual and the interplay with the intent of that mind. What's going to be manifest? Is that mind coming from its own lower self, I'll call the ego? Or is it coming from that higher self within us that is in contact with the divine, with that divine spirit? That's going to determine what gets manifested physically.
Right.
So often, and Jesus talked about this in the Bible, when he was talking about this woman who gave, just a very small amount, but in proportion to what she had, she gave so much more than other people were giving. And I think that goes along with our intent. What's our intent? That's going to really determine the physical. Not so much what is the gift that I'm giving. What's the intent?
Right.
What's the purpose behind it? Does it have, as you were talking about, that spiritual base? Or is it coming from a different place? Is it a giving to get, or is it a giving to give? And when you do give that way,
Right.
what is returned to you is manifested so much more. whether it be from the
Yeah.
spiritual attributes of kindness and love and patience, or material things. They're all connected, but that intent will, I think, determine how it's given and how it's received.
That's wonderful. Wonderfully said. Thank you, Bill. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show, and I thank you for that last note with your intent. I think that is hands down the most important thing when it comes to charity work is what's your intent in giving.
Mm. Well,
Absolutely.
thank you,
Well,
Brent.
thank you so much, Bill. Yeah, of course. My pleasure having
Yeah.
you on the show, and thank you so much for always being there to join us for the thought for the day. It's always wonderful listening to your words of wisdom.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoy it.
My
Have a great
pleasure.
day.
We'll see you next week, Bill.
I look forward to it.